you are aware, Tamara and I are going to feed off each other. So I'm starting, but Tamara will also jump in because she has lots of practical examples that she's going to be able to provide as well. So you'll be hearing from both of us. What the idea is, though, just so you know the way that we're planning on running it, is the sense that I'm giving you sort of more of the foundations, the theory side to a certain extent, the boring stuff, don't force it too much, but Tamara's going to come in with some nice practical examples and her experience in working in HR across a number of the SME within the local area as well. So hopefully you'll gain something from both of us. But what we wanted to start with was just the idea that, remember, with human resource management, regardless of the size of an organisation, the idea is that you need to be seeking to attract staff, obviously. That's why we're looking at recruitment and selection side. Then you need to retain them, and that's an issue in itself. And the ability to retain them is closely linked with motivation. But what we're focusing in on is the staffing side, so the recruitment, the selection and the induction side today. And what we're going to do, is I just wanted to highlight that it doesn't work in isolation. So just because you're doing recruitment and selection doesn't mean that it doesn't link in with other activities within the HRM functions that need to be carried out. And so that's what we're going to be looking at as well, in the sense that you need to make sure that you're getting the planning right, and also too that it closely links in with performance management, in the sense that, and we're going to explain why that is. And there's also a link with training, and also about assessing HRM effectiveness and assessing your recruitment selection as well, in regards to how well you're doing it. Okay, because everything that we do within business should always have in your mindset the need to continuously improve. So with the continuous improvement is the sense, okay, well, we've done that, but at each stage, not just at the end, but okay, what could have been done better in what we did? Okay, so that's what we're going to look at. So with the alignment, what we wanted to highlight is that the HR you might, within your organisations, who's more medium size and has a HR department or HR officer? Yes, okay, so there's a couple in the room, yes, and there's counsel as well. So that's great. But then within small businesses, you don't necessarily have that luxury of having a designated person to look after your HR. So that can be slightly problematic. But regardless of that, the key thing is to always go, have we got a business plan? Okay, so every business needs a business plan. Who knows who's seen their business plan? Excellent. If you haven't seen your business plan and you're working in a business, and you really need to go back and ask the question, we really need to be sharing the business plan with the staff so they know what it is and what they're in place to do. And so that's sometimes the issue, in the sense that we recruit staff, but how closely is what we're doing linked back to our business plan? So you have to think about that, and there needs to be clear alignment at every stage, and that links in very closely with performance management as well, so I'll come to that. But just making sure that you've got your business plan, then you've got your HR department, and thinking about how that all links in together. So moving on to the HR life cycle is the sense when we're talking about planning in the HR side. So yes, you've got your strategic business plan, then you've got your HR department, and they should have a HR plan within their own, or if you're working in a smaller business, is the sense that you need to be able to be aware of, okay, well, what is it that we're striving to do? Are we looking to grow our business? Is there a particular part of the business that we're looking to grow? Is it a product that we're bringing out, or is it a particular service that is going to be new, or it's just through growth that we're needing to increase our staffing? And so you have to think about, okay, strategizing and planning for, okay, well, what jobs need to be done, who needs to do it, and when? Okay, so that's the HR plan side. And then that links in, obviously, with your recruitment. Okay, that makes sense, because you plan, okay, who do we need? Then you go, okay, well, we need to acquire staff to do that. And there's different ways that we're going to look at as to how you acquire the staff, but you're probably quite aware of that. But we'll look at, the advantages and disadvantages of that. So right people at the right time is what we need. But it's one thing to get quality applicants and to choose them, and to get them on board, but there's another issue of making sure that you sustain them once they're there and keeping them motivated. And I was reading a report today just around the best places to work within Australia, and the top 50 listed, and why they were nominated as the best 50 and that type of thing, was their staff were happy. The staff was satisfied. They had a passion. They loved what they did. They loved their organisation, and they wanted to go every day. And they felt the sense that they were listened to in their workplace, in the sense that they had a voice, and they were encouraged to be innovative. So they're things to take away as well, in the sense that you need to think about how you're communicating with your staff, how are they encouraged to be innovative, and how are they given the opportunity to continuously improve. So there's some really good key takeaway messages there, that have you got processes in place to allow for that? Okay. So when it comes to the strategic recruitment side, and before we just launch into the actual recruitment down the bottom about, just doing your advertisements and doing the recruitment side, is that you have to do your prior planning first, okay? And that's about making sure, yes, you've done your forecasts about who you need at the right time, but now it goes, okay, well, have we got the information we need to make sure that when this person comes on board, they know what they have to do. Plus also, we know what we want them to do. And is that closely aligned with how we're going to measure and evaluate that? So with job analysis, that seems rather complicated. Some of you in HR will know, but if you're more in small businesses and looking after HR, you think, well, do we do job analysis? Yes, you do. Job analysis is all about creating a job description and a job specification, okay? So it's about working out what is it that this person who's going to be employed to do needs to do, okay? So it's all about the duties, the responsibilities, who they'll be working with, also to the experience they're going to need, their behaviours that you're looking for within that business. And Tamara's going to go into that in a little bit more detail. And so really recruitment is about just making sure that you're attracting a quality bunch of people that want to come and work for your organisation. So you have to focus on that first before you move on to the selection, but you have to be thinking about also how you're going to select them at the same time. But just noting, recruitment is about making sure you're attracting a quality bunch of people that want to come and work for your organisation. And the selection is about then using appropriate assessments to work out who's the best candidate from that bunch that you've got. Okay.
The only thing that I probably would say that over the period of recent years, just with skill shortages and difficulty, is that businesses get real clarity and agreement on a bit of a traffic light system on what roles, as part of their recruitment policy, what roles are easier to process and fill, say, locally, and you've got less lead times, etc., through to some that are much harder to find, that will take much longer lead time, which would be a code red, that where the organisation has agreed what budget they put on a code red versus a green-based placement, and actually having that kind of discussion more broadly, so there is an awareness around what that might look like for the organisation, that if someone ups and leaves, their notice period might be 4 weeks, but their code red might take 6 months to fill. So what's the game plan in that there, and what budget do you have attracted to that to try and get a locum or a different situation? So I think it's more than there's such a plethora of what you could put in there if your organisation would benefit from getting clarity and discussion and consultation on that early on in that development. Certainly I've found having the conversations around a traffic light system really helpful from my point of view, and knowing radio that code red has this budget attached to it versus a manager not saying, well, I had no idea it was going to go and take 6 months to potentially fill this type of role.
Yeah, so thinking about that and your risk management of that and your key positions, succession planning, all that type of thing.
Salary benchmarking, the higher ones you might go a higher benchmark than the average to attract. You want to limit that lead time.
Exactly. And with the selection side too, what we've been talking about in the last couple of sessions we've run is also the importance of thinking about whether your organisation is doing any drug and alcohol testing, medical assessments and that type of thing. So in that regard, it's about, if you are, then that really should also be included in your policy, in the sense that that is something that your organisation does, and so that's basically transparent to everybody in the organisation, plus also those coming in, and how that will be facilitated, who it is that you utilise and that type of thing with that. So definitely those are the things that you'd like to see, and there are different policies and procedures out there that you can use and you can benchmark it against, and there's some areas we'll look at as we go through as well. So, but also too, in the sense, what we wanted to highlight is the sense, as Tamara said, certain positions take longer to fill, but you want to make sure that you do it as quickly as you can. And why do we want to make sure that recruitment is as expedient as it can be?
So you don't use a key.
Exactly. So you don't lose your key candidates, because the key ones, the quality ones, are probably being sourced or headhunted from somebody else. So it's all about making sure that you do it as fast as you can, but in a quality way. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. All about making sure that you do your prior planning, and that's with everything within business basically, but recruitment and selection is certainly no different. And thinking about who's involved in the process, what's our budget, when are we advertising, when are we going to do our selection assessments and everything like that, have we got our panel organised? Make sure you have that all organised before you start it, because otherwise it can blow out, and you have to have people's commitment. Otherwise, like we said, you risk the fact that you might lose your quality candidates, basically. Okay, so just coming back to the job descriptions, and I think I'll hand over to Tamara a little bit here, and she can give you some real practical examples of how she's been utilising job descriptions.
Yes, so certainly there's such a plethora of options and approaches around the job descriptions in this day and age, and it's really what's going to suit your organisation and size. I feel like I've got my back to the group. So one of the things that I seem to find a lot of is that organisations either have a turnover in a particular position, and they go and whip out the last job description that was left in the filing cabinet and shake off the dust, etc. And really go about getting to market. I think there's such an opportunity to ensure that as an organisation you're taking the time to actually analyse if you've got an opportunity to refresh that, and ultimately consideration of what improvements would be made, or what kind of skill set would benefit if it's not just a cookie cutter approach to what you might have had in that particular role that would benefit to that. A little bit later on in the session we're going to talk about portable skills and transferable skills, etc., especially what we're facing as a society and skill shortages and lots of baby boomers retiring and different things like that, is that we have to think more broadly. And I think not being completely fixated on, obviously if you've got a job description and it says you must have a degree in X, etc., is maybe thinking more broadly around what else that might look like, and actually refreshing that, because that can be actually quite a repellent to a candidate that is exceptionally good, but they don't hold that particular degree, or that whatever you've actually been quite narrow on saying that you must have this, is because imagine if you had someone with a great attitude and work ethic, and you can add that sphere of training quite quickly, you would end up with a better long-term candidate that if you scoped wide and consider adding those kind of things on. I'll open up just one that we've got sitting in the background here. It's a bit of a position outline, so it's not a full position description, but it's actually just to give you a little bit of an overview that and this is certainly my own opinion as such, is certainly when we're developing job descriptions, it's not just about the key responsibilities of what we're actually wanting that person to take ownership of and what they need to do well to actually produce a great return on investment for having that position exist. But I think it's about getting real clarity on what type of skills that they need to turn up with, and what kind of behaviours that you're looking for and competencies around that type of area. So if we look, I'm certainly a big one for position outlines or position descriptions to really just clarify the overall purpose of the role. I think that's really powerful for anyone, whether it's an internal person considering moving into this role or a new person coming into the organisation, is to, we all want to earn money, but doing so with a purpose. So I think this is the first part of socialisation, whether it's into that particular role or whether it's newly into your organisation, is that you're really setting the scene around purpose. Main responsibilities. Look, I have the opinion that you want it to be a document that people continue to engage with, but they should be able to rattle off their top 4 or 5 key responsibilities that they know within themselves that they need to be great at and delivering on. If you're handing out a 5 or 6 page job description, for example, it can be, people can honestly, not have a complete connection with all those different points over 6 pages, and that my honest belief is that if you can't summarise, and the person that's potentially going in the role can't exactly summarise in around 5 key points about what they need to be great at and what they need to take ownership for, and that it can start to get a little bit murky or down into tasks more than overall responsibility or ownership. So the other one that I'm really seeing some benefit from in position outlines or descriptions in this day and age is this behavioural type stuff. So, sense of urgency, we're looking for someone who can be quite analytical. So understanding and setting that sort of scene around expectations at that particular point is certainly going to help you with your recruitment process in the longer term, is getting real clarity on that type of stuff. And the honest answer is that a lot of times people don't end up being successful in their probation periods, and that is around that fit. It's a behavioural situation, moreover, they couldn't actually do the particular task or responsibility that you were hiring them for, and that. So right at the very early stages, start to talk around those types of things, and that starts with your advertisement and your position description.
So basically, we believe that a position description is needed for every position within an organisation. We appreciate some small businesses are smaller and question whether they should formalise it. My opinion is that they should, for the reasons outlined, so that both the employer and the incumbent of the role know exactly what they have to do. They've got 4 or 5 main responsibilities that then they're held accountable for, in a good way though, and not in a police sergeant way, but in the sense, this is what we want you to focus on in the business, and we want you to then meet these particular aspects. And you might have metrics in place, or you might have, what's the way that you worded it, Tamara? Sometimes I've said KPIs, but you said...
look, I think, depending on the size and feel of your particular organisation, if you're a 1 or 2 man band, etc., calling someone in and saying, let's talk about your KPIs can be really
intimidating,
structured, and people find it hard to create conversations at times if they're not seasoned in this, and often it's just about finding vocabulary that you find really comfortable, that suits your workplace and your culture. And if KPIs don't come in, let's talk about your KPIs this afternoon, sounds completely foreign to you, it's more important about having the conversation and being able to relay your expectations. So in smaller business, my experiences would be, if I'm sitting down with the owner and he's got one other person working, we talk about what we want you to focus on in the next 3 months, etc. What we would like to see more of from you, or you're not meeting expectations in this area and you're rated a 2 out of 5. That starts to get really harsh, and the next day you've got to go and really work together quite closely as a team. Is that the vocabulary and having the conversation is far more important about whatever you term it. There's no rules that you have to call something a KPI, etc. So we would like to see more of this from you, and I would like you to focus more on that. And so I think it's...
the vocabulary and the coaching, the mentoring aspect of it, about how can we assist you with doing that, is there anything you're struggling with, and that type of thing, and having the conversations, critical conversations is really what it's about, in order to make sure everyone's on board, everybody's clear, and about having agreed ideas of when you're going to have those conversations as well. Yes, it can be informal, but do you have weekly sessions? Do you have monthly sessions? Do you have one-on-one sessions, that type of thing? Or do you do this as a team? Or do you do it as a team and then you do it as individuals as well? So just about setting the scene with that, and some parameters around that is what's really important. What you want to put into the job descriptions is going to be up to you as an organisation. Tamara's highlighted a really good example. Some things to think about though are, what is the accurate title of the position, no waffly titles, exactly what it is that they're employed to do, who they're reporting to, what's the purpose of the role, their location, 4 or 5 key points about what the duties are, and what are their working conditions and that type of thing. But I like the little, Charlie Brown about, I've always wondered why you decided to be a dog. Well, I was fooled by the job description. Anyway, that's quite cute.
Title is certainly one to put a fair amount of emphasis on. Certainly my experience can be just because a particular role is titled something within your organisation for whatever reason, if you're out to market and you're not attracting the candidates, and that is to maybe think about that would be one of my things to go and actually tweak. Put yourself in the shoes of the person that is sitting most likely on the other side of the computer, and what are they typing in, searching for, etc. Because it could just be it could just be one word. So, for example, most recent example for myself is that I've been searching for these state sales managers around Australia in the construction game. And if I just have the word sales, I get half as many applications as if I put sales and specifications. So state manager, sales and specifications, construction industry. My application rate, scoping wide, cast your net wide, and bring it in, etc., is that, and even for me, I'm astounded by just actually, so I've recruited in 2 states and was having, there was discussions through the organisation, they wanted to drop specifications out of the actual job title because they wanted more focus on deal closing, etc. But in the construction industry, I don't know if anyone has experience in this space, specifications is actually a big thing. So putting that back in there has certainly increased those applications. The same thing is that you might call your role a company accountant in difference to a finance manager, and another one is that if you're not feeling that you're getting the traction in the process, just change the title up. You can actually go through and have the discussion to say, well, actually, when you find the right candidate, we actually call it this in here, but it's about actually finding the right people and what they're searching, and don't be scared to change that title up. I could have an ad out for 30 days and change it 4 times to try and see what I'm scoping in. Keyword searches, and it's a data-driven market now about what's getting thrown up in front of people a lot of the time.
Exactly. Also what they'll need for. So we found recently we had an advert out for an analyst and we weren't getting the attraction that we wanted. We changed it to senior analyst, which in our structure was a very small move, but it just sent us through the roof with our applications. Yeah. Because people were willing to move for a senior analyst role, but they weren't going to move for an analyst role because it was like for like. When we asked them, what places before, did you say? Yeah, but it was like for like. This is a different role. This is a senior role.
What it looks like on their CV.
What it looks like on their CV. It looks like a promotion. Yeah. I'm not going to move for something that's not more than what I'm already on. Yeah. But and it was about them saying, well, is the role actually a senior role, which you could also look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Without doubt, that's got to be tricky. I've had exactly the reverse of that. Is that I was looking for senior farmhands, etc. And we took the word senior off. And just put it out as farmhands, etc. And because what a person feels is, oh, that sounds like it's got a lot of responsibility attached to it. It might not be at that level yet, but ultimately it's then finding, someone might not class themselves as a senior, but great work ethic, great work attitude, skills that can be further developed or willing to learn, etc. You would take them on over a person that classes themselves as a senior, but you don't get all of these other aspects. So it's massive.
So, and with this whole process, it's about consultation too. So yeah, the whole job description, don't think that you create this in your little silo. In the sense, who should we consult when we're doing forming, developing? Who do you think? Sorry?
Manager.
Yeah, the owner manager, plus who else? Who else would you consult? Let's say it was... Yeah, the person in the position. So if it's an existing position, definitely consult that person. Who else? Any other ones? People who maybe have reported to that position as well, what they think that person's been doing and that type of thing as well. Also to any other networks, so benchmarking, having a look out there on the internet and seeing, okay, for other position description, for that title, what else is other organisations doing, but not just falling into the trap, well, that's what they're doing, that's about making it work for you, but just making sure that the whole thing about a job description is making sure that you get an accurate idea of what this person needs to do within the organisation, and that you get the buy-in from the people who need to be working with the person and that type of thing. So just with anything really, consultation is often very useful. So just bear that in mind. Okay, and then with legislation as well, in the whole recruitment selection area, as you're probably well aware, it is a bit of a legal minefield, or it can be. And human resource management is as a whole. It's one of the most legislated areas, really, the employment law side. So when you are writing job descriptions, when you go through the selection processes, when you're going through induction as well, there's a number of things you do need to take into account, and also as you've got them on board. Things like you can't, employ somebody, you can't discriminate because of somebody's race, sex, age. And we're seeing that more in consideration with the ageing workforce as well. Also too, gender. And that's not, an exhaustive list, but it is a large part of the main things, and I'll bring up another slide in a moment. But also too, you do need to bear those in mind. And also too, same with Work Health Safety Act as well, Fair Work Act, making sure that if you are employing somebody who's handing out the National Employment Standards Information Statement and things like that, every employee who's employed with your organisation needs to get that. That's a legal requirement. It's the one-page document. It's from the Fair Work Ombudsman website, so making sure you're doing that. Making sure, I'm a big believer in checklists, so for every employee that's that you bring on, is that within their personnel file, and this can be recorded, it may be manual files, it could also be an electronic system, or whatever works for your organisation is appropriate. But making sure that you've ticked, yes, we've done that, yes, we've done that, yes, we've done that. Just so otherwise you can find yourself, oh no, I thought we did that. No, we didn't. Or if you get audited, so these are the things you do need to be mindful of as well. And work health safety legislation. So we're going to come to that when we're talking about screening and selection as well. So if we can go to the next one. These are some questions to consider about if you do have job application forms. Some organisations do, some don't. But also just as part of your recruitment and selection processes, like when you're seeking to get somebody on board, do you need to know their age? Do you need to know their gender? Do you need to know any national or ethnic origins? Yes, you might need to know if they can legally work in Australia. And that can be the question that you pose. Do you need to know their name? So people go, well, of course you do. Well, what's the particular issue with names? Can I identify gender? Can I identify national ethnic origin potentially? That type of thing. And people have their own stereotypical views about it as well. So just in regards to, well, how do you remove that? Well, it's about whether using a recruiting agency or somebody within the organisation is first given those, and then before it goes to a selection panel, which is again something we promote, is that any of those identifying characteristics are removed before you hand out the relevant information data because of that issue. Okay, I see some people nodding their heads, smiling and that type of thing, so maybe they've experienced some discrimination or are aware of it. So it is particularly important to consider that, especially moving forward within the diverse workforce and everything like that, and competing for employees. I think, again, the report I read today was the sense that, yes, employment growth is happening, but and unemployment is decreasing, so that's making it increasingly difficult though, with the combination of factors with the ageing workforce and that type of thing, that it's really an employee market rather than an employer's market, in the sense there's a lot of jobs out there at the moment, and that's only going to increase. So the ability to attract the best quality applicants, and especially in regional areas and country areas, is increasingly challenging. So you've got to think about, well, moving beyond yours or other people within the organisation's mindset sometimes, and if there's been discriminatory views or whether you think that that has the potential to occur, then how do you try and minimise that? So, with your recruitment channels as well, is just noting, as we sort of highlighted a little bit before, is that you can look at internal recruitment, you can look at external recruitment. And there's lots of options depending on the size of your business, but what are some of the advantages of internal recruitment? Quick, absolutely. Yeah. What else? Exactly. They know you, you know them, you know if you could work with them, that type of thing. Absolutely. So quick, cost effective, you know them, they know you. Anything else?
Good for morale.
Absolutely. Yeah, morale. So in the sense that, okay, like we were highlighting before, if, for example, you're one of those people in the organisation and they don't even advertise it internally or give you the opportunity to put your hand up, that can feel like a bit of a kick in the gut sometimes. So it's about, okay, well, just making sure that you're thinking about that. And that whole succession planning within your business in order to retain and minimise turnover and that type of thing and develop your staff. They see that as valuable, they see that they're respected, that type of thing. So it's something. But again, it's not always an option. If you don't have, if it's a new position, they're not qualified and you need somebody qualified and skilled to do it. So you might need to look external, and there's lots of different options for external, and think about what the job is and where are you going to find, where do you think, and Tamara will come to this in a moment. Do you want to do that after the break sort of thing? Yes, sorry. So, but yeah, also I was highlighting, basically there are lots of opportunities, like we work in universities, there's RTOs, there's schools, don't forget about those, there's the career and industry expos as well, thinking about what's appropriate for your industry and where to tap in, going into the schools themselves as an employer and giving information sessions. The schools are usually quite open to that, so think about that and think about, well, we traditionally employed males, but can females do this? And I'm doing research in, you know, women in male-dominated trades and that type of thing. So think about, well, actually, yeah, there are opportunities there, and yes, and going in there and promoting the opportunities. If you've got a mentor or somebody you can bring into these types of places to highlight that, then it can break some barriers as well. Now just going on to the job advertisements as well, okay, and Tamara's going to come back to this, but just bearing in mind when you are drafting your job advertisements, the idea is you want to get somebody's attention. Okay, so, but you want to get the right candidate's attention, so you want to make sure your ad's spot on. So eye-catching, descriptive title, as Tamara highlighted, make sure it's appropriate, you know, and that you're pulling in rather than being too narrow. Make sure it's interesting in the sense that, and desirable, and you're creating some sense of the sense that you want somebody to, who's a quality candidate, to go forth and apply. So make sure they know how to apply, make it easy for them to apply, because these are the things that, you know, if it's too hard or, oh my gosh, I had to fill out 5 pages on the website, you know, that can really, I've, you know, been in a position where you go, oh my gosh, am I still going? Like, oh, and then I ask you to attach your CV. Well, don't ask them to attach the CV and then ask them to copy their CV details into, you know, pre-filled forms and stuff like that. So either one or the other. You know, so just thinking about your process and getting somebody to run through it in your organisation and checking out your website and if it's got enough information and that type of thing, and make it, when we're saying desire as well, why is you're an employer that somebody, why is your place a place where somebody wants to come and work? What's attractive about your business? Why is it an employer of choice? What do you do differently to other employers? What are the incentives you're offering them? You are competing with other organisations, so you have to think about what is it that we're offering that others aren't? What makes us better? What might be some examples? What do you think are some good examples that you may be seen or heard as to what might make a good employer, or what attracted you to the business you're working for now? Next is just, in summary, with the recruitment, we'll go into the selection. So make sure you've got the realistic job previews, make sure you've thought about whether you're doing internal, external, combination of, who's going to be doing the recruiting as well. So have you got a designated person that somebody's contacting? Are they a good advocate for your business? Are they going to sell and market your business in a positive way? Don't give it to somebody who's a bit cynical and is like, oh, hello, you know, on the reception end, you know, and so you really do have to think about, who is that point of contact for your business, okay? The inducements, like we spoke about, the advertising, Tamara will come back to, and your image, reputation, they all play a key role. Word of mouth is huge, you know, as to whether people want to come and work for you. So never forget about that, especially in small regional areas. You know, word of mouth can be a killer for you. So just be thinking about that and be creative, innovative in the way that you might do your advertising. Think of something that's just going to grab their attention and that type of thing. So basically you do want to make sure you come up with, through your recruitment process, hopefully you've got a short list of candidates, you need to cull them. Maybe you've got 30 people, you need to think about how you're going to now select them. Okay, maybe ideally you've got 30, you know, and maybe I think the average at the moment is about 17 for a position in general. So that's a very average figure. Probably doesn't mean a lot. But anyway, you do want to screen it down probably to about 5 that you're going to go through your selection assessment tools with. But first of all, there might be some that you can easily just go, well, no, they haven't addressed this, haven't addressed that, and that type of thing. But create a spreadsheet or some form of record mechanism that allows you to do that, because you're going to need to fall back on that if there was any potential, appeals or something like that. Just bear in mind with the selection process that you want to look at whether the person fits the job and can do what's required. But Tamara will come to the sense you still need to be flexible with that in regards to tasks. And I'll let her talk more of that later, but also to the person-organisation fit. So yes, people go, well, they looked great on paper, but when we brought them in, I'm not sure that they're going to fit. Well, you have to, that is a consideration for your business. Are they going to fit into your culture? Because if they're not, then that's going to be problematic. So thinking about how you're going to assess them on whether they will fit within your culture and what's a good way of doing that. So, okay, we're going to look at some selection options, but making sure that before you go into this and one person's doing it in isolation, really try and get a selection panel. Ideally 3 is what's recommended, and that you train the people who are on that selection panel. So not just the supervisor, yes, the supervisor, but have they been trained in how to do selection and what are the legislative requirements, and the fact we're not allowed to discriminate. Don't assume that they know you're not allowed to discriminate based on race, age, gender. Do they know about the different selection tools that you can utilise? And talking with them if they are the supervisor about what is the best tool to use, or what's the most important job, task that somebody needs to do in the workplace. Okay, well, how are we going to assess somebody from a skills perspective whether they can do that? Don't just do the interview, but the interview is very important, but it's one part of the combination of the selection process. Okay, so and each person within the selection panel will have roles and responsibilities, but it's just about if you're doing the interviewing, who's asking the questions, when are you going, who's going to ask what question, who's doing the recording and that type of thing. So, okay though, make sure when you are choosing your selection assessment tools that they relate to the job. Okay, so hence talk with the supervisors, like we were saying, what is related, what is valid, and what's cost effective, because you can't, at the end of the day, it could blow out. You could do so many selection tools, use so much selection tools, but you have to make it efficient, effective, and costly. So minimise the cost. Okay, so with that in mind, think about whether these forms of it, and Tamara's already highlighted to me in the earlier sessions when we ran it in Karen, don't use the words testing, and she's very right. It's more about assessments, okay? It's not about what's right and what's wrong. It's more about, are they competent in doing what you need them to do, really? So think about, and these aren't not all of them are appropriate, excuse me, for what you might need people to do, but can you and should you be assessing somebody on their intelligence, on their aptitudes, on their personality, manual dexterity, managerial abilities? So hence, with that, can you use psychometric tests appropriate? So should we be using personality profiles? Should we be looking at medical assessments, behavioural interviews, or a combination of? I would suggest a combination of, and I'll let Tamara talk a little bit more about that now if you wanted, practically.
One of the things that we were speaking about earlier on is the medical assessments, etc., and considering what you were wanting to determine from that process. Certainly drug and alcohol testing as well these days. So thinking about whether it's still the appropriate process and you'll get the best information to assist in making decisions around, is that just sending them off to a standard GP, or what are you actually trying to achieve by sending them off for a pre-employment medical assessment? So thinking about that there is other products on the market other than just being sent to a standard GP, which could be going through and completing functional assessment with an OT or a physio, etc. So slips, trips, falls, manual related tasks are actually the highest cause of injury in Australia, and being able to get some sort of feedback on their techniques will give you an indicator. If there's someone that's quite been in the workforce for quite a period of time and has been in a labouring type role and still has an extremely poor approach to manual handling, well, one of those things would be that's a bit of a risk-taking type behaviour. You've got the opportunity to offer them some training, etc. The other thing, you'll get some feedback, if they've got less strength in one arm over another arm. You're not going to get that by sending them potentially to a standard GP assessment. We don't have these old school family doctors in this day and age that they treated 3 generations of your family and can often give you a full lineage assessment of how you are. So I think there is some real valid options about considering or investigating further functional assessments. That's my preference in this day and age. Obviously, drug and alcohol testing. Over recent years, I deal with a lot more prescription-based drug issues in workplaces than I do of illegal drug-taking behaviour. So that's something to consider the abuse around. It's not just you going looking for marijuana, for example. It's actually understanding what a person might be coming to a workplace with on board in that sense. Obviously, there's a plethora of behaviour of psychometric assessment out there, and it's just actually considering what you're going to go and look for and why. Free assessments on the internet are probably not the right choice in that to get a really valid, robust document. I don't think it would be fair on the candidate. You do need to pay money of some form, and that there is some types of assessments out there that weren't painted correctly, and so there's a plethora of free ones on the internet, etc. But it's really what you're trying to achieve out of that. And ultimately, you could look to create some sort of assessments internally. It's not about throwing lots and lots of money at all of this. Is that there could be very good logical assessments that you could actually put in place in your workplace through just really analysing deeply about what you're trying to achieve out of that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and there are a number of organisations that can help with that within regional, local areas, but just look for people who are qualified with psychometric testing to just give you some guidance with that. And sometimes it's just about an initial, it just depends, but they're the ones who should administer it, because if you are doing psychometric testing, there is a fair bit of considerations around that, about the environment that they should be doing that in, the candidates, and who gets to assess the reports and what that actually means for your workplace and everything like that. So be mindful of that. And also with the medical assessments as well is, more the drug and alcohol as well. In the sense that, they are becoming more commonplace now. But again, in your advertisements, if you are going to be doing drug and alcohol screening as part of your employment practices before and ongoing, that's highlighted in your advertisements. And we were highlighting as well in a couple of the sessions is the sense that also helps you screen applicants, because and you actually want that, because if people go, oh, I'm going to be screened, they won't apply. And that's good. Because if they've got issues, then you maybe don't want them on board. So think about that, okay? So also too, when it comes to behavioural-based questioning and interviewing, which Tamara is going to focus a lot on in the second session, so I'll leave that maybe for her to talk about. But just bear in mind as we're going in as a lead-in that, with the questioning, it's about previous performance really does predict your future performance. The research heavily indicates that. So how somebody's performed previously is a very big predictor of how they're going to perform going forward. So thinking about the questioning that you're going to ask around that. So, but yeah, she's got a wonderful handout she'll give you, which I think you will find very valuable. And with the selection process, I like this little grab, this universal paradox, in the sense that you are free to choose who you're going to employ. This is the way I relate it to recruitment and selection, but you are not free from the consequences of your choice. So with that, you think you're going to employ the best person, and they're great, and I've got this really good gut feeling about them. However, if you haven't adopted a scientific sort of approach and a methodical way of employing people, you can be stuck with some issues that you have to manage in a not so nice way within your organisation. So yes, gut feelings are important, and that helps with that organisation fit, but make sure you go through the process of do we know what we want from the employee in regards to what they have to do? Have we got the criteria? Have we assessed them to determine whether they can do that appropriately? Have they got the behaviours? Have we assessed that type of thing? So using a mixture of things rather than just the gut feeling. So with your referees as well is, yes, I think a referee reports are quite useful, but you need to be mindful that it's not the brother or it's not the father-in-law who's giving the referee. Okay, so people go, oh yeah, this is their phone number, you know, give them a call, this is Bob Smith, I worked with him previously. How do you know if he did or she did work with Bob Smith? And who is Bob Smith? You know, if you're just calling, how do you know that? So can you call them? Can I send you an email? Look at the email address. Can I have 2 minutes of your time? And the questioning that you ask, as much in the interview with the behavioural interview questions, it's about the questioning. Yes, you know, a relative could be utilised, but they're not going to stand the test of time if your questioning within your referee checks is really appropriate and really is asking for good detail. Not just when did they work for you, how long did they work for you, were they a good employee? Ask them for specific examples. Just in regards to the selection as well, just finish it up, ideally with a selection report. Okay, so as you finish the selection process, is make sure that you do I'm not expecting a 10-page report, a 1-2-page summary is ideal, where you're just highlighting what the position was that you were seeking to fill, who was on the selection panel, what were the methods of advertising you used, the channels you used, who applied, who did you shortlist, why did you shortlist them, and then basically who was your preferred candidate and why. Is really in regards to evaluating the whole process, okay, with your recruitment and your selection, like I was saying, is really consider, okay, what is it that you're seeking, and how you're going to assess whether you've achieved what you wanted. Did we get the candidate we wanted? So how productive were we with that? Were there quality outcomes? What were the costs involved? What was the time involved? You know, looking at soft data in regards to surveying the people involved. So on this next slide, we've got some information about types of questions you could ask the candidates about, was the program appropriate? You know, was it easy to follow? Was it interesting? Depending on the size of your business, this isn't terribly helpful. Maybe if it's this formal with, you know, small business, like, you know, or micro business, but medium-sized businesses, you know, you could use SurveyMonkey and get them to do, especially if you have certain stages where you're inducting 5 or 10 people or something like that. Or even smaller is just having a one-on-one with them, or asking them to fill out a survey after a week of being with you, and just getting some input basically and some reactions to how they felt. The last slide here is just really in regards to making sure, you know, within everything that you're doing, this one highlights basically absenteeism as an issue, and absenteeism and turnover are clearly linked often with the need to recruit and select staff. So if you've got an absenteeism issue or a turnover issue, and if those types of issues are costing you money, then think about why they're costing you money, what can you do to better improve your practices within your business, and then implement the program basically and evaluate the whole process is really the idea. So
ultimately, what I get out of bed each and every day to do is to try and help businesses find the absolute best possible candidate for whatever they're trying to achieve with their business. So having some form of strategy, or at least plan of what you're trying to achieve in business, and adding labour to that and what they're doing each and every day is actually contributing to moving forward and achieving that particular strategy. And ultimately, it is not as easy, and I don't think that it is going to change anytime too soon, that we are going to be inundated with a plethora of skilled labour that we might be looking for, and there is a raft of reasons that we are finding it more and more difficult to be able to, you know, find and attract the people that we need for our businesses. So ultimately, some of those things could be certainly over the time how we think about work in this day and age. So thinking about when many of us might have come into the workplace, our approach to work, etc., is that ultimately at the end of our schooling, etc., we knew that, you know, we were searching for some form of career, and there would have been potentially a lot more influence about what you were leaving home to go off and do, or that
sense of the village. The village often had influence over, where many people headed off. If dad was a farmer, son might have become a farmer, or you moved, through a family business, etc. We may not have the same percentage of that available to us. So that whole thought process around work in this day and age, or I'm going to go off and travel and I'll figure out what I'm going to do, later in life, etc. So how we search for work is certainly changing. For me, being in this space, what I was doing potentially a year ago to find candidates, I'm constantly having to refine what I'm doing, and what works, maybe 6 months ago might not be working when I go out and recruit for a really similar position. And so it's constantly staying ahead of that, or being prepared to be flexible about how and where I'm going to place my adverts and how I'm actually going to attract those. And just going and putting an advert up on a couple of job sites, you may find sheer disappointment out of that, is that there is work to be done, is that there is a large amount of passive job seekers out there, and thinking really critically around where your ideal candidate might be located and how you actually get that candidate to find you. And I spend a lot of my time, I have one organisation down in Bathurst that I would have probably hired 10 reasonably senior people for over the last 12 months, and I would suggest that I found 7 of them out of the 10. They didn't apply for the job that I had certainly available and up and advertised, etc. Is that I'm spending a lot more of my time looking and searching and sifting through resumes that are located on job boards, etc., and looking for transferable skill sets. Is that there is a large amount of movement in society for them to have confidence to go, well, just because I don't have project management listed on my resume, I won't naturally be as brash to go and I'm going to go and flip my resume out to project management type roles. So one particular example of that in recent times is that, and some of you in the room here may have had experience recruiting really good project managers, for example, is that they're not sitting out there with, long careers and lots of qualifications, just waiting for a job to fall into their lap out here in the Central West, etc. So it's about being, creative, and part of that process was, where am I going to find the type of person? If I think about what I need for a project manager to be really successful, what are the other kinds of roles that I might be able to find them in, etc. And so some of that success, particularly for a couple down in Bathurst, is I need project managers in construction, and I've hired a couple of ladies out of property management. They're really similar type roles, fairly loveless, a lot going on. You're trying to achieve through a really tricky scenario where it's never quite black and white, and you're trying to keep moving forward, etc. And certainly it's been a really interesting example for myself to see that. Went out and looked for people with great work attitudes, great work ethics, etc., interested and wanting something more from their career, and ultimately reaching out to them to say, I can see you've loaded your resume to this particular job board. I actually have this role over here. We actually take a look at it and come along for a chat with me. In difference to, I can't do that, is actually making that to say, I can see that you have some really interesting transferable skills, and if you're operating in this particular position, let me have a discussion with you about how I join the dots on this. And it's worked really well in that particular example. And what we're expecting from work, like I mentioned previously, is just around that purpose. Is that specifically, people are wanting to buy into a story, or they're wanting to understand how they fit in the bigger picture. Is they're not necessarily just getting out of bed and going, well, I have this job and this job title, is wanting to understand about what's possible for them. The reality is that we're having so much more influence in this day and age, and the digital disruption, and recruitment isn't left alone or in a silo from this particular situation. We are so connected in this day and age. If you think about in bygone times, if we wrote our resume up, we'd probably have half the family look over it to make sure that it sounded really good, and we made sure that there was no typos and those kind of things, and then we would actually take the time and be very considerate about applying and hope to hear back, etc. Now, our approach and what connectivity means, etc., is that especially ones like LinkedIn, that can be quite fatiguing. If you're a sought after candidate, you can absolutely be getting pummeled by recruiters and that wanting to know if you're interested in moving careers and wondering why you're not actually getting those replies back, etc. Or just around how, that communication style with candidates, etc., can be completely different than it has been. And I certainly think how we're going and finding jobs now around this digital space, ultimately there's that move away from newspapers, for example, or certainly back in the day you printed off resumes and went out handing them out, etc. Certainly, for example, some young ones, and we have had some of the highest unemployment rates with under 25-year-olds and that, and certainly we're trying to, as employers, think differently about how we can find the best people, etc. And certainly some of my suggestions in recent times is, well, if everyone's just flicking off a whole lot of CVs and hoping for the best, and if you're really committed to finding that particular role, why not go and print your CV out again? Is that I certainly come across employers going, I'm finding it so hard to recruit staff. I used to, at the end of the year, I'd have 5 or 6 of them come through my door and hand over their resume and look me in the eye and shake my hand. And so if you've got young ones still wanting that, there is a whole range of employers out there hoping actually a good person would actually walk through the door and they'd say, well, come back and have a trial with me. So I think there is some benefit in having those kind of discussions, and if you want to set yourself out from the market, you maybe want to get off this bandwagon a little bit and maybe set yourself out from the candidate pool. So there's a really interesting concept of that, that we are so connected all of the time, and I guess thinking about where we're placing our adverts, and if there's a large amount of people, say with Facebook in this day and age, is thinking about that utilisation of adverts going onto that. There is Facebook groups out here in the Central West that have thousands of people. I also talk about at times when you're putting out targeted adverts on Facebook, is just because you might be going out to find ideally a male mechanic, if that's what you're specifically thinking that you're going to find more of, for example. But in your targeting and that, I would be suggesting that you keep it open to male and female, etc., is that there is a lot more opportunities out there for women to work in non-traditional trades. And the other aspect to consider is, whilst you might go, well, I'm not going to find that mechanic, on Facebook, the person I'm looking for may not have a Facebook page, but I can assure you that his wife or partner might, and they're actually then seeing the advert and being able to pass that information on. And it's quite cheap. As we head into 2020, it's going to be the first time that we've had 5 generations in the workplace. That in itself is needing for us to spend some time thinking really laterally about what that means to finding the best talent. And I don't think overlaying, potentially limiting beliefs. Oh, well, if I hire someone that is of this age, they're going to go up and retire and that type of thing. Would you rather have a really fantastic person that goes above and beyond, that might work for your organisation for 3 years, versus a very average person that might stay there for the next 10 years? So I think that's really something to consider. I think, also considering at the other end of it is that making sure that we're going out and looking for the person and understanding their motivations over which generation that they might fall into, and what our general opinion is of that particular organisation. I think that you could be losing some really significant talent. The other one that certainly I've found that is employers are wanting to be more open to thinking about is that just because you've had a particular position that's been Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, etc., and you're throwing your hands in the air and saying, I can't find any decent candidates for this position, is that my mantra is, will you cast the net really wide and think about what you could have more or less of, etc., is that there is certainly roles out there that, and there is workforces to match that, and particularly with baby boomers or working parents and that they are craving to have a role that is 9 to 3 so they can have it all. You don't have to choose in life. It's actually perfectly okay to have the motivation and the general intent that you want to have it all. And my big belief is that, ultimately you find a fantastic person and you have some ability to be able to cope with a 9 to 3 role, etc., is again, you'd much rather have someone that is going above and beyond, that is delivering, than an average person 9 to 5. It could be, great opportunities to get win-win job share arrangements, etc. You don't have to get everything from one position. And I think that can be really dangerous. If you go, we're going to chuck all of this stuff into this one position, it's going to be the silver bullet to everything, etc., is that the reality could be some of those particular roles and responsibilities of that position could come from a different wired person. Well, this trait and this responsibility over here would be best delivered by someone with this type of personality and behaviour, to what we're also putting in the job description that's requiring this over here. So thinking more broadly about, well, is there any reason that you couldn't have 2 25-hour roles and actually working to people's strengths? And that's what we want to really see more and more of, is that we all have strengths. And this goes back to tests versus assessments, is that there is no right or wrong to all of this. There is right people for right positions, and there's right people for other positions, etc. So being able to analyse that through it all. Payroll employee to potentially working for themselves versus how all of these kind of things come up. I think that's going to be really interesting and challenge our limiting beliefs around what can work and what can't work, and the reasons why they can and the reasons why they can't work, and really taking some of those questions back to candidates and not assuming. I think that's the other one, is that when you've got a pile of candidates and you're looking to shortlist, etc., you could actually be missing out on some of the best talent in that particular set of resumes, because look, I'm horrified and can be completely unstable on some days about the quality of resumes that I attract. And I think that is just not okay. It is not okay that you're sending that out. But it could be that I'm not looking for a fabulous word processor, but there is something that triggered me in that particular resume. Well, he's volunteered for the Red Cross. He tells me that he won the grand final and that kind of thing. You've got to go looking for some gold nuggets in these kind of resumes, because if you base your whole process off whether they can word process or not, you could lose some really great talent. Pick up the phone and actually have a short conversation with him. I can communicate with him. He sounded like we could, hold a conversation, and I asked some questions. Particularly with the job site Indeed, for example, you made mention about taking your resume and having to paste them into online forms, etc. A lot of people don't bother pasting. They just have a bit of a crack at filling, bits and pieces in. What I do find when I find some really woeful ones that I'm like, they can't be going to market with this resume, I'll write back saying, actually, do you have a better resume or a better word-based resume? And I'll generally get a better resume back, or they'll do something with it, or both of us decide this is not going to work, those kind of things there. So I think the transferable skills is going to be something that can really help increase your likelihood of feeling satisfied with your recruitment process, and ultimately either broadening your quality of candidates that you have to choose from, or ultimately finding the number one that you're actually out looking for. I'm certainly a big believer that going forward over the next few years or generation, is that we will move away from this word-based type resume format, etc. It's already happening to some degree in our LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn is our resume effectively online, and I think that we will ultimately see more of these video-based introductions, etc., as part of the process. There is larger organisations now already doing that. You won't necessarily speak to someone first up, is that you'll actually record your answers to questions, you get a couple of goes at it, etc. But it's already starting to happen, and I think that will develop in time as well. My true opinion around position adverts is that ultimately that you take the time to really reflect and be able to concisely describe the type of organisation you are, is that this is a sales process. It is an employees market out there, and they're connected day and night, is that how do you stand out from the pack? And you ultimately want a position outline or a position advert that the person reads and says, mentally, I can do that, and that sounds like a great place to work. So ultimately speaking, is that you want to tell them a little bit about your organisation. And I'm a big believer of the law of attraction, is like attracts like, is that you put a bit of effort into writing up an interesting, fact-filled advert, etc., is that you will attract better candidates, etc., than if you just go and put the 5 things I want, is that is exactly what you're going to get, is an employee that I want. So I think that there is a big opportunity there if you take the time to really get a detailed advert together, is that it can improve your particular recruitment. So what is everyone using at the moment, or do they have a preference of where they go to put their adverts at so Facebook doesn't actually like you potentially putting up content that's going to drive people out of Facebook, etc. So my suggestion on that example is to go and actually put an actual post up, maybe a couple of line-ups, and saying see link to the actual see link to the job, or the ability to apply down in the comments. So certainly Indeed is the one that I'm going to focus on tonight. Even for me that works in this space day in, day out, it looks like a spam site as you go and log into it, and for a long time I was like, oh, I don't know, it just doesn't give me the right sort of vibes, but it actually is quite a good value for money website. So for example, Seek, for you to get onto that job site and use it to the full function, is that you will buy and pay for your advert, which is about $300 straight up, to then be able to place your advert to get access to the back end of the resumes and the database that's actually sitting there. Certainly Indeed is one that's less commonly used for whatever reason. Seek is the largest job board in Australia. Indeed is the largest job board in the world. Certainly I think it's probably coming up the ranks to some degree. So let's have a little bit of, name of the game is to find the best possible person to fill your role. Well, obviously it's not going to be, I wouldn't be suggesting from a professional sense that you go and place your accountant advert on Gumtree, etc. But if you think that you've got candidates that might be for a semi-skilled role or something along those lines, truck drivers and that type of thing, Gumtree's probably a perfectly current solution and the like. I've actually filled some roles for 6 months and that by using Backpacker Job Board. So I can't stress to you enough about just not having limiting beliefs. It's about finding good candidates and then making the decision, actually I found this person over here, they can be long-term and full-time, etc., and I don't need to go with this option and the like. So I think, so certainly mechanics, for example, I've filled quite a number of roles where they'll come and work for 6 months as a mechanic. That's a reasonably transferable skill, that I can fill that role while I continue to look for longer term options around that, for example. So finding resumes. So I have all sorts of searches set up, diesel mechanics, accountants. I can have any new resume that's loaded in Orange on Indeed. So I have Orange and Bathurst set up because I spend so much time recruiting in this particular space, and I'll have, I don't go through all of them every day and that type of thing, but I will spend a bit of time having a quick flick through and seeing what kind of skills and what's been recently, loaded up, and it's just simply about me being ahead of the game, for example. So if we use this as an example, if I could spell this out, it would be really helpful. We might type New South Wales and we go find resume. So on here you can see there's 267 resumes. I don't know if I can put so you can see up here it'll tell you how many are loaded, 267 resumes in New South Wales with auto electrician. If we move over here, we can actually fine tune that, is that great, I know how many resumes, but I actually want to know who's actually really becoming more active than others. So I would go within the last month, you can go within the last day, whatever you might like. So there is 25 auto electricians. It says to me is that they've taken some form of action on this particular job board and they're on the move. So it means that I would be considering going through and taking a look at those. If I haven't had them land in my mailbox, And you can see there, I actually contacted this fellow here on the 20th of August. It actually gives you a bit of a tracking process there. And that cost me $1. So if you think, for $300, you can only put it in one location on Seek. For $300, I put about 5 ads around Australia at $50, and I spent $10 on contacting 10 people for $1 each. Who knows? So you can see there, resume alerts saved. That's one that I'm actively using, and that at the moment, so you can hit cancel on that. I was recruiting, like I said, farm managers and different ones. When I'm occupied, an academic answer to this, but you can actually take that name and go and put it in LinkedIn, and you can actually then message them for free. So just depends on what you're saving up for. Okay, so I think whilst it doesn't look like a particularly fantastic website on the back end of it, so stational therapists and that type of thing, I'll have all of these kind of searches saved up, and then I just cancel them when I'm finished particularly recruiting for that point in time. Some of them I just leave going, like diesel mechanics. I know some ladies over here often would be interested in that. Let's be honest, if a plane load of diesel mechanics landed here in the Central West, they'd all have jobs by nightfall. So I just have that particular search running all of the time. So how do I get back to my power? So look, certainly taking the time to spend on Indeed and just learning the functionality of that particular website. There is plenty of occasions that I would recruit for reasonably difficult roles, and I spend virtually zero money on advertising. I put no money behind the adverts, and I might send 10 people contact requests, etc. And remembering, as soon as you recruit on something like Indeed, you might have put $50 behind it, but you can turn it off then, so you don't even spend your $50. Like I might spend $14 and I've found a great candidate and I turn it off. Okay, so this is the exact example I was telling you about. This is the kind of data that is available for Indeed. So you can see that this is what Ben sent me. Ben is an account manager down at Indeed. He looked up Glazier for me. It was searched 5,346 times. That's a bit fuzzy up there this evening. And you can see that Perth and then Brisbane was the next top location there. How fantastic. I'm a massive advocate of, again, scoping wide and trying to cross paths with passive candidates. I am constantly spending my time thinking about my avatar of who I'm looking for and where they might be lurking. Obviously online, I'm not that strange that I'm out stalking them, not yet, but thinking about, I'm a real fan of social media and where I might find these particular people. There's job interest groups. Sign writers, for example. There is a whole sign writers in Australia group on Facebook. So if I'm recruiting sign writers, I'm going to go place my advert on their little group. Like backpacker boards and that on Facebook, etc. If I'm looking for construction. Women in construction, there is so many interest groups, so it's really about sitting and laterally thinking about where you might find your candidate. But look, passive job seekers, it sort of fits in with about, sort of 70% of jobs may not even be advertised, but certainly passive candidates that they're not actively looking for a role, but if the right opportunity crossed their social media page as they swiped past or something along those lines, and certainly the people that are their indirect contacts in their life, they often will share with, it's probably time that I look for something else, or I feel that I'm really topped out and there's no further opportunities, and that is if they're crossing paths with people that know that, and they might read your advert and then tag and share it with them, etc. So thinking about if you've got a number of people working in your organisation, and we could have another whole session on how to drive LinkedIn if you're not necessarily just using the whole loaded job and pay $185 and that type of thing. But if you were looking for candidates on LinkedIn, I'll often go up into the search button and say accountant seeking. A lot of people will update their role if they are literally looking. So it will bring up every accountant that's listed on, or it depends on, I guess, just the year and whether you're a premium holder on LinkedIn, etc. But honestly, I've recruited accountants by going to that search bar and typing in accountant seeking, and then I go and connect with them, etc. And then my standard practice is writing, if if they are saying seeking, I can literally write and say, look, I can see from your profile that you're seeking. There will also be other candidates that say their job title is accountant, but they may not be actually saying that they're seeking. And I feel, as much as probably I break a few rules, etc., as I don't want to be this completely random person going, will you talk to me about this particular role? So I'll generally write and say, I can see that you're in the industry or you're in the local area. It might be, that it's coming up as New South Wales. I'm recruiting for this particular position at the moment, and I wondered if you might know of anyone that might be looking in your particular network. Many of them will come back saying, oh, Tamara, I wouldn't mind having a chat to you about that particular opportunity, and I'm sitting at the other end of my computer going, bingo, like as in, I just think it's giving them that opportunity to say no, but I'll keep it in mind, etc., or come back. Certainly I've picked up a structural engineer by that particular approach, that it's not too intense, and it's reasonably polite, and that we'll come back and say, actually, I would be interested in having a chat to you about that. One of the other aspects that is, once you've found your particular candidates, then you might be extremely happy with what you've seen so far, is that you really need to analyse whether you have certainly found the right person. And like Stacey was saying, is that a behaviour-based interview approach is going to give you the law of probability of that past performance is a great predictor of future performance. Being able to recall demonstrated examples on a particular scenario, and that's much harder to do if someone's lying. They need to actually, and being able to assess some of their body language of recall, and how they're going through that particular process, I think is really powerful. The second part of asking anyone for a particular demonstrated example on whatever it might be, can you tell me about a time, if you were looking for someone with some leadership aspects, for example, can you give me a demonstrated example and something that you might be proud to share about whether you've seen someone progress through their career under your particular leadership, and tell me about what the steps you took in your particular preferred process in that. And they will start to sort of run through what that scenario was. Well, I had this little Johnny on my team, and he come to me with this, and he left with that, and I felt great about the world. It could be different ones around, can you give me some a demonstrated example on a complex scenario relating to the implementation of a software system, if that's something that you're going to be looking for in there. The really powerful point of that conversation will be understanding whether they've been able to describe and concisely talk you through that particular example. But the power of that process is, well, what did they learn from it? And can you tell me, so looking back on that particular scenario, if you had your time again, would you do anything differently? Because that's a really powerful process to understand. Did they learn from it, and what reflections they have? Because you're looking for people that have a continuous improvement, growth mindset, etc., that they're not going to do the same thing over and over again if it didn't necessarily work well that time, or they've actually analysed through evaluation what they would like to have done, or what they learnt personally from that particular process. Can you tell me about the best manager? You have a manager or mentor, I actually really like the words around. Can you describe? I'm not actually interested in their name or where you worked with them, etc., because it's actually not about getting down to that. But what are the descriptive words? What did you really appreciate about that particular person? Because ultimately then you're overlaying that to say, well, does that fit some of the characteristics, for example, of the manager that they're going to come in and work with, or that the manager might be in the room, etc. The other side of the coin is, can you describe the most challenging manager you've ever worked with? Again, I'm not interested in name, I'm not interested where you worked, but can you tell me about the descriptive words you would... and certainly I have candidates that will sit there going, oh, he used to lose the plot because I was 3 minutes late, he just needed to chill out, etc. What's generating you to be an active job seeker at the moment? What are you looking for in your next career step? Because you're able to then overlay whether you think you're actually going to be able to furnish and fulfil that particular motivation that they're looking for. I'll have candidates, I'm so sick of being away from the family, I'm on the road 5 days a week, I never get to see my kids. If I'm recruiting for a similar role and they're not going to necessarily be home that much, it's about actually talking through that to say, well, this is the reality of this situation. Or being able to sell your particular organisation. Well, I certainly have a role here, and that's not going to be the expectation. You should be able to be home 10 minutes after finishing work. We don't do a lot of overtime, etc. So I can see how this could be a real win-win situation for that candidate. Anyway, behaviour-based interviewing, and hopefully you might take away, and it's a bit of a learnt habit. It's something that you will honestly get better with in time, and even just the next time that you need to interview, and that is just trying to have a go at a couple of questions. I'm not expecting. It should be something that is a really easygoing conversation, etc. And it's not just about following that every question straight after another. Go with the flow of it. If something tweaks with you in your mind that you're like, oh, can you expand on that a little bit more? Or a minute ago you made mention of that. Can we go back and talk about that? Is that get it flowing. You will know so much more about your particular candidate. Really making it an easy flowing conversation, etc. And that they relax, and you will start to see the true person that you are potentially going to hire.